This video supposedly shows a woolly mammoth crossing a river in Siberia. It quickly went viral, racking up 3 million views on YouTube and more. People couldn't help but wonder if the mammoth had been living for centuries in remote parts of Siberia, completely untouched by humans. Now, whether you think this video is a hoax or not, there have been some interesting reports of supposed living mammoths. They're believed to have gone extinct over 10,000 years ago, but there are still stories floating around about them being spotted in some of the world's most remote places, especially in the northern hemisphere's tundra. Native American tribes have been telling tales about these creatures for years. The Northeast Algonquins talked about a great moose with a weird extra limb growing between its shoulders that it used to prepare its bed. The Naskapi people from northeastern Labrador spoke of a monster with a long nose that it would use to hit people. Even Siberian tribesmen have reported seeing large, shaggy beasts roaming around, though no one's actually caught solid proof. There have been mammoth sightings across Asia, South America, North America, and Russia. What you're looking at here is a massive-sized sturgeon. The footage originally posted by Ronald Drago was shared and reposted all over the internet, and it's easy to see why. The creature is just a monster. The sturgeon is an ancient creature that's been around since the early Jurassic period. Some of these fish can grow over 20 feet long, which is as big as a great white shark. They mostly feed on small animals from the ocean floor and are harmless to humans, but because of their size, they can still pose a threat. There have been reports of sturgeons leaping out of the water, landing on boats, and causing serious injuries or even death. They can weigh over 1,000 pounds. This footage here was posted to YouTube by Adam Pitts, who'd hauled in this Jurassic-era sized beast in Florida. A bunch of hunters had been trying to snag this thing because it was responsible for some deaths. No surprise there. This gator was not missing out on any meals. Pitts and his team had a long battle with the gator before finally hauling it out of the lake. It was about 12'8". It's sad, but unfortunately some animal populations just need to be controlled sometimes, especially when it comes to people's safety. This wasn't just a hunt for the thrill of it, it was for the protection of the community. This is not an AI video. This is a real piece of footage taken back in 2018 at a golf course in South Carolina. This gator was caught strolling through the golf course on its way to somewhere. It's become a pretty famous video. The event was taken by multiple people from different angles. Video of it showed up on the news, and it's understandable. It looks like footage of a living dinosaur. Even the family of deer in the background just couldn't help stand there in total shock. Like, what are we looking at right now? They're standing there like a deer in headlights. Alright, I guess deer aren't really all that hard to surprise. But still, gators are some of the oldest animals on the planet. I still find it so cool that you really are looking at a living dinosaur when you see one. This footage here was captured by members of a Japanese expedition crew in the Congo. They were seeking out evidence of an elusive animal known to the locals as Mokele Membe, a plesiosaur-like creature believed by some cryptozoologists to be a remnant of the Cretaceous period. Mokele Membe comes from Bantu mythology. It's said to live in the Congo River Basin. It's described in different ways. Some say it's a reptilian creature, others think of it as a spirit, but the most popular description is an ancient dinosaur-like sauropod. In the early 1900s, cryptozoologists got really interested in this legend, with some launching expeditions to find proof for the creature's existence. Most experts believe that the stories about Mokele Membe are probably based on sightings of the black rhinoceros, which used to roam the region. Some even think the myth may have been influenced from earlier tales about Great Zimbabwe. This next creature is called Tuatara. Just look at this silly, stubby-legged little lizard. Cute as can be, according to me. I know some people are freaked out by reptiles and lizards, but I really enjoy them. So these things can be found roaming around in New Zealand. They look like a lot of reptiles you've probably seen, very similar to iguanas, but these things have quite the history. They've been around for an estimated 225 million years. So once again, they're basically living dinosaurs, just very small ones. Pretty cool. What's also interesting about these things is that they don't have ear holes like modern day reptiles, so their hearing is, of course, limited, but they can still respond to low frequencies. Next up, we have the Chinese giant salamander, and when I say giant, I do mean giant. These are the largest amphibians in the world. Some of them can reach up to 6 feet in length, weighing in at about 110 pounds. That sounds like a salamander that would have been roaming the earth during the time of the dinosaurs, and they did. The Chinese giant salamander has been around since the Jurassic period, about 170 million years ago. These creatures are also known for their very unique and haunting sounds. They've been described as rather unsettling. Some people describe them as barks or hissing, but the creepiest noise is the high-pitched crying, almost like a very young human. Given how huge these things are and the fact that they clearly do not look human, that would be pretty freaky hearing a sound like that come out of an animal like this. But honestly, I still think these creatures are kind of cute in their own weird way. And we have another dinosaur, the Komodo dragon. These things are insane. They're huge, some of the biggest lizards on the planet, weighing more than a full-grown human in some cases, and these things are as dangerous as they look. They've been known to attack and even kill humans, and to top it off, their bite is venomous. Scientists have found Komodo dragon fossils that are about 4 million years old. These giant lizards are found in Indonesia today, specifically 5 islands, one of which is called Komodo Island, which, no surprise, has the largest population of Komodo dragons in the country. You can't just wander onto this island, not that you'd ever want to. It's very strictly a guided tour situation. If you ever visit, trust me, don't want to go alone. If you stray too far, it could be the last mistake you make. Komodo dragons are no joke. Along with crocodiles and alligators, they're one of the closest things we've got to real-life dinosaurs. These reptiles can reach lengths of 10 feet with razor-sharp teeth and venomous saliva. They eat whatever they can catch: monkeys, deer, boars, goats, and yeah, sometimes humans. They're just pure predators. Now, they don't attack humans all the time, but between 1974 and 2012, there were 24 reported attacks in Komodo National Park. The shoebill stork. These birds have been around for 30 million years at the least. If you were to look at every living bird today and you had to just pick one that looked like it had been around since the prehistoric times, it would have to be the shoebill stork, right? This is definitely the one I'd be picking. Look at the size of the beak on these things, very dinosaur-esque. Shoebills are found in the swamps and wetlands of Africa. They're massive birds, standing about 4 to 5 feet tall with a wingspan of 7 to 8 feet. They have this unmistakable shaped bill, which can reach lengths of up to 9.5 inches just on its own. This massive bill is a formidable weapon for catching prey, which is mostly fish. They're known to be very patient hunters, standing motionless for hours before striking at lightning speed. And these birds really are just as intimidating as they look. Highly skilled hunters that are capable of preying on animals as large as young crocodiles. And to top it off, they make this eerie clicking sound with their beak. They sound almost like an automatic firearm or the predator. What you are looking at here is a horseshoe crab. Now, crabs may not be all that exciting to you, but these ones are different. Horseshoe crabs are one of the oldest creatures on the planet. They've been a staple of the Earth for around 445 million years. That is a lot of years. That's back before the land split off to form the continents that we have now. Earth still consisted of one single supercontinent when these things were around. These ancient arthropods have seen old friends go and new ones come along, and when I say friends, I mean entire species evolve and then go extinct. They've seen a lot. And interestingly, even though they have crab in their name, they're not actually crabs. They're more closely related to arachnids. Homo erectus. These were the early archaic humans that evolved into Heidelbergensis, and from them came Neanderthals and Denisovans, or Denisovans, and then of course us, modern humans. So how cool would it be to see what some of the earliest members of the genus Homo were really like? Homo erectus is one of the most important species in the history of our evolution. They lived from about 1.9 million to 110,000 years ago, making them one of the longest living hominid species. They bridged the gap between the early Homo habilis and modern Homo sapiens. Fossils of Homo erectus have been found across Africa, Asia, and even Europe. This was the species that finally started venturing out into the world. They had a more modern body shape compared to their predecessors, with a smaller face and more elongated leg to arm ratios. They were a lot more bipedal. and their brains were still smaller than us ingenious modern humans, but were larger than species that came before them. They had more advanced tool-making skills, and they may have started developing more complex social structures. Speaking of tools, Homo erectus is known to have made hand axes and cleavers, allowing them to hunt and process food more efficiently. I've also talked about this before on the channel, but Homo erectus also may have made some of the earliest known art ever discovered, so that's pretty cool. Even older than Homo erectus again is Homo habilis. They roamed Africa about 2.4 to 1.4 million years ago. The name habilis means handyman, a name that they were given because this was the species that built some of the earliest stone tools ever discovered. Physically, Homo habilis had a mixture of primate and more advanced features. Their brain size was relatively small compared to later species, but it was an increase from the brain size of earlier hominins like Australopithecus. They had a more rounded skull and less pronounced brow ridges compared to their predecessors. They also built tools that were used for cutting, chopping, and again processing food. A big leap in technological development. In terms of their physical build, Homo habilis had long arms and a smaller body size, which a lot of paleoanthropologists think means they spent a lot of time in trees. At the same time though, they also adapted to walking upright. Their limb proportions were intermediate between more ape-like ancestors and later more fully bipedal species like Homo erectus. And in terms of how they acted, it's very hard to say. We don't have any direct evidence of that, but the fact that they made tools means they were at least beginning to engage in more complex social structures. Here's one for the Lord of the Rings fans. Ever wanted hobbits to exist? Because they did. They were called Homo floresiensis. Homo floresiensis, often dubbed the hobbits because of their tiny size. They're one of the most fascinating extinct human species ever discovered. These little guys lived on Indonesian island of Flores and were around from about 100,000 to 50,000 years ago. They stood only about 3.5 feet tall. But they were normal in terms of their proportions. It was like you just took a full-sized human and then shrunk them down in Photoshop. They were also pretty advanced. They crafted stone tools, and their small size didn't stop them from hunting and gathering. And they were managing to survive on an island with some pretty fierce predators too, like Komodo dragons, which, I mean, God, must have been like about their size. One of the big questions scientists are still trying to answer though is why these hominins were so small. The island effect was obviously at play here, where isolated populations evolved to be smaller because of limited resources. Perhaps a phenomenon that's often just called island dwarfism. Essentially, things just evolve weird on islands sometimes. But yeah, I would love it if these guys existed, an entire species of like little people, little hobbits. Now let's talk about Homo naledi. This species was discovered just in 2013 in the Rising Star cave system in South Africa. They lived around 250,000 to 300,000 years ago, which places them roughly at the same time as early Homo sapiens. They had a mix of old and new traits, like most of these on the list. Their brain size was about 500 to 600 cubic centimeters, smallish but not tiny. They had a somewhat primitive body shape with long arms and curved fingers, meaning they might have spent a fair bit of time climbing. But their skull and teeth were more modern looking, like those of later human species. What was really interesting about this find though is where these initial bones were found. Homo naledi's fossils were found in a part of the cave that was very tough to reach. They may have deliberately placed their dead there, meaning they might have displayed some early form of a burial ritual. The Denisovans, or Denisovans, are another fairly recently discovered species. They were first identified from a few bone fragments and teeth found in the Denisova cave in Siberia, which is of course where they got their name. What's really cool is that Denisovans lived roughly between 300,000 and 50,000 years ago, which overlaps with Neanderthals and early modern humans. Even though we only have a handful of fossils, scientists have been able to extract and analyze their DNA, and that DNA revealed something pretty crazy. This species overlapped with Neanderthals and early modern humans in a very intimate way. They interbred. They actually found the remains of a Neanderthal Denisovan hybrid, which was dubbed Denny. the one and only first-generation hybrid hominin that's ever been discovered. And there's still traces of Denisovan DNA in human populations today, especially in Malaysians and Aboriginal Australians. In terms of physical characteristics, Denisovans are a bit of a mystery. We don't have enough complete skeletons to get a clear picture of their overall appearance, which is why we gotta bring them back, see for ourselves. Alright, I'm cheating a bit here with this next one, but I just think it would be so cool to see one of these things in person, provided they were a fair distance away or we were separated by a very sturdy barrier. I'm talking about the largest known ape to ever roam the earth, Gigantopithecus. Not a human species, but a great ape. Distant cousins of humans, and they were around at the same time as our modern human ancestors, which is really cool, but must have been pretty intimidating. Gigantopithecus was kind of like the real-life King Kong of the prehistoric world. They were enormous primates that roamed parts of Asia between 2 million and 300,000 years ago. They stood up to 10 feet tall, went on 2 legs. The first fossils of Gigantopithecus were discovered in China, initially identified from a set of massive molar teeth and jaw fragments. Based on these teeth and jaw fragments, scientists estimate that Gigantopithecus could have weighed up to 1,200 pounds or more. Imagine a modern-day orangutan, but several times larger. Now, despite their size, Gigantopithecus was likely a vegetarian. Their teeth were adapted for grinding tough plant material, meaning they primarily fed on things like bamboo and fruits. And this diet would have supported their enormous size, but they would have had to consume a lot of food to maintain this size as well. Their massive size might have been a factor in their extinction. They may have just struggled to find enough food to support themselves and eventually just died out. Homo antecessor is a pretty intriguing species that lived around 1.2 million to 800,000 years ago. They were first discovered in 1994 in the Gran Delina cave in Spain, which is a treasure trove of early human fossils apparently. They're one of the earliest known human species in Europe and provided researchers with crucial clues about how early humans spread across the continent. They're often seen as a bit of an offshoot of the modern human line. They had a relatively large face with a prominent brow ridge, but their teeth and jaws were more similar to later species. This combo of traits makes them another puzzle piece and just this overall understanding of how our ancestors evolved. They were likely quite advanced in their tool making. The tools found alongside their fossils suggested they used sophisticated techniques for cutting food, meaning they weren't just surviving, but adapting and innovating in their environment. Now, of course, human evolution is this incredibly gradual, ever-changing thing, not just a series of completely separate pieces forming out of nothing. But with that said, Australopithecus was super important in our evolutionary history because they were some of the earliest known hominins that were starting to walk upright. They lived between 4 to 2 million years ago in Africa, and there are several species within this genus, like Australopithecus afarensis and Australopithecus africanus. These were much more ape-like, but were starting to form more modern human features. Their bodies were adapted for walking on 2 legs, but they still had those long arms and just overall more ape-like bodies. The famous Lucy, a specimen of Australopithecus afarensis, is one of the most well-known fossils. She was about 3.5 feet tall, which kind of gives you an idea of their smaller size compared to modern humans. Up next we have Dragon Man. Who wouldn't be intrigued by a species called Dragon Man? Their scientific name is Homo longi. They were identified from a skull found in Harbin, China, and have been dated back to around 146,000 to 300,000 years ago. The nickname Dragon Man comes from the site where this skull was first discovered, Longjiang meaning Dragon River. The skull of Homo longi is incredibly well preserved, giving us a lot of insight into what this species might have been like. The skull was large, hinting at a larger brain, similar to that of Neanderthals and modern humans. The brow ridge, quite pronounced, but the shape of the skull overall and other facial features are more advanced and closer to modern humans. Some scientists argue that Homo longi might be a direct ancestor of modern humans, or a sister group to Neanderthals and Denisovans. And of course, this list would not be complete without the species that came in second place in the race to dominate the world. They almost beat us, but they failed. the Neanderthals, or Neanderthals, a species we coexisted with and some say competed with for a very long time. Oh, how badly do I want to know what these things actually looked like and acted like. Were they violent and predatory to us, or were they friendly dummies who we preyed on and eventually killed off completely? There's still a lot of debate on that. What we do know is that they lived in Europe and parts of Western Asia from about 400,000 to 40,000 years ago. They were shorter than us on average, but a lot stockier and robust, built for more cold climates. They had a wide, strong body with barrel-shaped chests and short, powerful limbs. They had larger brow ridges than us, and jutting faces. They kind of had that stereotypical caveman look. A lot of people get confused and think that look was just us, but they were a completely different thing. I joked about them being dumb before as well, but they actually weren't. They had sophisticated tools of their own. They also created art based on paintings and ornaments found in caves. Neanderthals were also very skilled hunters, taking down very large game like mammoths and woolly rhinos. They would have been fierce opponents to go up against. If we were able to form technology advanced enough to resurrect extinct human species, Neanderthals would probably be our best bet. We have the highest percentage of their DNA in us today. We interbred with them. Genetic studies reveal that non-African humans carry about 1 to 2% of Neanderthal DNA. So guess what? Scientists just brought back the direwolf. Yes, the actual creature. This is not something they're close to doing. They've actually done it. Colossal Biosciences, a Dallas-based biotech company, announced that they've successfully used ancient DNA to create 3 direwolf puppies. CEO Ben Lamb said, "Our team took DNA from a 13,000-year-old tooth and a 72,000-year-old skull and made healthy direwolf puppies." He also added, "It was once said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Well, today our team gets to unveil some of the magic they are working on." So 2 of the pups are named Romulus and Remus. The third was named Khaleesi, of course a nod to Game of Thrones, which features direwolves. In fact, George R. R. Martin, the author of Game of Thrones, actually got to hold one of these pups. How nuts would that be? You write a fantasy novel with these long extinct creatures in them, and then decades later you actually get to hold a real living one. I don't think any goal I can imagine is ever going to live up to that. So these pups aren't clones. They're actually genetically engineered to be as close to direwolves as science can get. They were born from surrogate dogs and raised with bottle feedings, so they're friendly for now, but they're already starting to act more like true wolves. Thankfully, they live on a massive 2,000-acre preserve with cameras, drones, and guards keeping an eye on them. The Bucardo, or Pyrenean ibex if you're feeling fancy, was a wild mountain goat that went extinct in 2000 when the last known female, named Celia, was found squished under a fallen tree in Spain. Brutal way to go, honestly, but science wasn't ready to let her go just yet. In 2003, researchers went Jurassic Park on the situation, and they took frozen skin samples from Celia, using them to create a clone. And it worked, sort of. A domestic goat was used as the surrogate mom, and against all odds, a cloned baby ibex was born. It was the first time an extinct animal had been brought back to life. The victory party didn't last long though. The clone only lived for about 7 minutes. It had a severe lung defect and couldn't breathe properly, so technically the Pyrenean ibex became the first animal to go extinct twice. Kind of amazing and kind of heartbreaking. Even though the success was short-lived though, it proved that de-extinction wasn't just science fiction anymore. It was messy and complicated, sure, but it was real, and a real possibility to do better. And in those 7 minutes, the seemingly impossible actually happened. So pronounce something like Przewalski. Przewalski's horse is a prehistoric-looking beast that once roamed the steppes of Central Asia. These stocky horses are the last truly wild horse species on Earth. Not wild as in used to be tame and then went rogue, wild as in never domesticated. But things didn't go well for them once humans showed up with fences and firearms. By the late 60s, these horses were completely extinct in the wild. The only ones left were in zoos, but in 2020, scientists stepped in. Using 40-year-old frozen cells from a stallion named Kaporovic, they created a clone, and boom, you had a healthy baby Przewalski's horse, now born in a Texas facility, who they named Kurt. Kurt's genes came from a bloodline that hadn't been part of the breeding pool in decades, so he brought much needed diversity to a population that was getting a little too inbred. And thanks to years of conservation work, these wild horses are back in their native Mongolia, running free once again. The quagga was a strange-looking animal, a zebra subspecies with stripes in the front half of its body and then just a plain brown rear end. It once lived in the grasslands of South Africa, roaming around in large herds, but like a bunch of species, it didn't survive European colonization. Settlers hunted it for meat and hides, and by the 1880s, it was declared extinct. The last known quagga died in captivity in Amsterdam in 1883. For a long time, scientists didn't even realize the quagga was a distinct subspecies. That changed in the 1980s though, when a German natural historian named Reinhold Rau launched the Quagga Project. Using preserved skins and taxidermy specimens, Rau conducted genetic testing and confirmed that the quagga was genetically close enough to plain zebras that selective breeding might be able to bring them back, at least in appearance. The idea was to breed plain zebras that naturally showed fewer stripes, generation after generation, until the animals started to resemble the extinct quagga. Over the decades, the project produced zebras with lighter coats, reduced striping, and even that same body shape described in old quagga records. The animals born from this project are now called Rau quaggas, and sure, they aren't true quaggas in the genetic sense, but they're close. Some have even been reintroduced into the environment in South Africa, living in the same type of environment their ancestors did. The Lord Howe Island stick insect was once believed to be extinct, wiped out by invasive rats and other pests. The insect, also known as the tree lobster for its very weird lobster-looking appearance, lived on Lord Howe Island in the Pacific Ocean. By the 1920s, the insect had completely disappeared though, or so everyone thought. For decades, it was assumed that the rats had done them in. But then in 2001, there was this incredible discovery. Researchers came across a population of these thought to be extinct insects surviving on Ball's Pyramid, a jagged, steep rock formation off the coast of Lord Howe Island. The fact that these things managed to hang on in such a harsh, isolated environment was mind-blowing, as well as the fact that they were even there at all. So now, scientists have been working hard to breed them in captivity and reintroduce them to their original island home, and they're slowly making a comeback. The Rastrador Brasileiro is a hunting dog that was bred in the 1950s to chase down jaguars and wild pigs in Brazil's thick forests. But by 1973, the poor dogs got hit with tick-borne diseases and a bunch of insecticide poisoning to try and get rid of the pests. Well, this was enough to wipe them out, and they were officially declared extinct. In the early 2000s, though, a group of dog lovers and breeders formed a group called the Brazilian Tracker Rescue Support Group. They set out to find any surviving dogs that had the original breed's traits in them. They spent years tracking down these dogs, selectively breeding them, and by 2013, they'd successfully brought the breed back from extinction. The Floriana giant tortoise lived on Floriana Island in the Galapagos. As the name suggests, these were huge tortoises, about 4.5 feet long. Sadly, by the 1800s, they were wiped out, mostly thanks to overhunting by sailors and the introduction of invasive species. And for over a century, everyone thought they were totally gone. But in 2012, scientists discovered that there might be some hope after all. They found a female tortoise on another island, Espanola, that had DNA showing she was related to the Floriana tortoises. This tortoise was nicknamed Lonesome George's cousin, and scientists went to work on a plan. They started breeding her with tortoises that were genetically close enough, and thanks to years of careful breeding, they managed to create a population of tortoises that closely resembled the extinct Floriana giant tortoises. It wasn't a perfect clone job, but was close enough to bring these species back in a new form. So while we don't have the extinct Floriana giant tortoise wandering around exactly, it's still better than nothing. Okay, now here's one you probably haven't heard of, the Montreal melon. So this is a type of melon that was native to Montreal, obviously, and used to grow in the area back in the 1800s. The melon had a very unique flavor. It's been described as having a slight spice to it, almost like nutmeg, and apparently it would just melt in your mouth when eating it. No surprise, it was a local favorite. But this melon pretty much disappeared in the early 1900s. No one really knows exactly why. Maybe it was due to disease or just the change changing farming practices at the time, but whatever the case, the Montreal melon was gone. For over a century, it was nothing but a legend. But in 1996, seeds were discovered at a seed bank in, try and guess where, I'll give you a second. That's right, Iowa. Well, soon enough, the Montreal melon was back on local menus. The York groundsel was a little yellow flower that was hanging on in some pretty unusual places in York, England. It was a cross between two other plants and would grow in strange areas like railway sidings and roadways. But like many things in the world of nature, it didn't stand a chance once the city decided to crack down on weeds. By 1991, the flower was officially declared extinct in the wild. But just because it was gone doesn't mean people gave up on it. Turns out, there were seeds stored in the Millennium Seed Bank, a place where scientists keep seeds from all sorts of plants for situations just like this. In 2023, experts from Natural England decided to give the flower a second shot at life. Using those stored seeds, they managed to grow the York groundsel back to life, making this the first ever successful de-extinction in Britain. Now the plants are being reintroduced, and it's a major win for conservation, proving that with a little help from science, you can sometimes bring back what was thought to be lost forever. So sure, it's not an animal, but still a living thing, and that's pretty cool. The coelacanth is probably one of the most famous rediscovered animals in the world. For centuries, scientists thought that the coelacanth was long extinct, way back since the end of the Cretaceous period, around 66 million years ago. But in 1938, something that could only be described as mind-blowing happened. A fisherman off the coast of South Africa caught this unusual fish, and after scientists carefully examined it, they were amazed to find that this was a coelacanth. A fish that was supposed to have been gone for millions of years was still out there swimming in the ocean, and since then, scientists have tracked down several other coelacanths in the waters around Africa and Indonesia, proving that this ancient creature somehow survived the mass extinctions. So yeah, this one isn't technically de-extinct, just rediscovered. Still though, does make you wonder what other seemingly extinct animals may actually still be out there. Colossal Biosciences, a Dallas biotech founded in 2021 by George Church and Ben Lamb, actually brought the direwolf back from extinction. They took ancient DNA, one sample about 13,000 years old, the other around 72,000, identified about 20 genes that gave the ancient wolves their larger skulls, stronger bones, lighter fur, more muscular legs, and then they used CRISPR to edit those into modern gray wolf cells. They cloned those edited cells via what's called somatic cell nuclear transfer, transferring the edited cells into dog embryos, which were carried by domestic dogs. Romulus and Remus arrived in October of 2024, and Khaleesi in January of 2025. They were about as close to actual living direwolves as they could be. They live in a 2,000-acre Texas preserve with 10-foot zoo-grade fencing, cameras, drones, vets, care staff, a storm shelter. Colossal calls it functional de-extinction because they're not true direwolves. They're wolves with more ancient-type traits designed to fill the same role in the wild. They're not Jurassic Park level clones, but I mean, they're pretty damn close. Colossal Biosciences also gave us what they call the woolly mouse this year. Scientists compared DNA from around 121 mammoths and elephants, some fossils more than 1 million years old, to find out which genes made mammoths suited for cold. They picked 7 genes responsible for fur length, texture, color, fat storage, and then used CRISPR to edit them into regular lab mice. And the result was mice with long, wavy, golden fur and extra fat storage. In under a year, they had 38 of these woolly mice. Now, you can see where this is going. What we really want are mammoths. So why start with mice? Well, they reproduce quickly, about a 20-day pregnancy, so Colossal can test if the edits work in a live animal before trying them in larger species. The next step is Asian elephants, whose DNA matches mammoths 99.6%. They plan to edit 65 to 85 mammoth traits into elephant embryos, then implant them into pregnant elephants. Their goal is to have an actual mammoth calf by 2028. Maya was born on June 10th, 2022. She's the world's first cloned Arctic wolf. The team behind it was Syngene, a biotech company in Beijing. And they pulled it off using skin cells from a wild Arctic wolf that had died. They took that DNA, and basically swapped the nucleus from the wolf cell into an egg cell that had its own DNA removed, and then they created the embryos. They implanted those embryos into beagle dogs, and it worked. Maya came out healthy. She's not de-extinct since Arctic wolves still exist in the wild, but this was a huge moment for cloning endangered animals. These wolves live in brutal, frozen environments, and their numbers are starting to shrink because of habitat loss and climate change. But Maya proves we've reached a point where cloning can realistically help endangered species from disappearing completely. The Tasmanian tiger, also called the thylacine, looked kind of like a skinny wolf with stripes on its back, but it wasn't a wolf at all. It was a marsupial, basically a mammal that carries its babies in a pouch, like a kangaroo. These things used to roam Australia, but after years of hunting and habitat loss, the last known one died at Hobart Zoo in 1936. For a long time, that was the end of the story. But now scientists are trying to bring it back. In 2017, a group in Australia managed to sequence the thylacine's DNA using bits from old museum specimens. Then they started editing the DNA of the thylacine's closest living relatives, like the Tasmanian devil, to try and build a working embryo. They're using CRISPR to swap in thylacine traits, hoping to eventually grow one either in a surrogate animal or maybe even an artificial womb. Passenger pigeons used to be everywhere in North America, millions of them flying in huge flocks. They'd roost in forests so thick that branches would break and drop tons of pigeon droppings, which is gross, but it actually helped fertilize the soil. By 1914, they were totally wiped out, thanks to overhunting and habitat loss. But now, scientists are trying to bring them back by using DNA from museum specimens and editing that into their closest living relative, the band-tailed pigeon. Because band-tailed DNA isn't identical, this would create a hybrid. Not a perfect passenger pigeon, but it would be about as close as you can get. They also tested how reintroducing these birds could affect forests. For example, researchers in Michigan simulated how a massive flock might disturb the trees, breaking branches, letting light in, changing the soil, in order to see if these birds would actually be helping anything. Right now, the team has band-tailed pigeons with CRISPR gene editing tools built in so that the edits can be passed to their offspring. And they're aiming to hatch the first passenger pigeon-like chicks around 2029, before eventually testing releases back into the wild. The Pyrenean ibex, also called the bucardo, was a wild mountain goat that lived in the Pyrenees Mountains between Spain and France. It was extinct in 2000 when the last known female, named Celia, died after getting caught under a fallen tree. But scientists were not ready to give up on the species. In 2003, researchers used frozen skin samples from Celia to try cloning her. They took DNA from those samples, inserted it into goat eggs, and implanted the embryos into domestic goat surrogates. For a brief moment, it worked. The cloned ibex was born, the first time an extinct animal had been brought back to life. But the clone only survived about 7 minutes. It had really bad lung problems, so technically, the Pyrenean ibex went extinct 2 times. But the experiment was not a total failure. It proved cloning was possible, it just had to be perfected. The northern white rhino was nearly extinct by 2018. There were only 2 left in the world, and they were both female, so it really looked like this was it. But scientists in Kenya, along with members of the Leibniz Institute for Zoo and Wildlife Research in Germany, and the San Diego Zoo's Frozen Zoo, collected eggs from the 2 surviving females and used frozen sperm from males that had already died. The plan is to make embryos in the lab and implant them into southern white rhino females who can act as surrogate moms. That way the babies would be northern white rhinos just born from a closely related species. The process is not easy though. Rhinos have really long pregnancies, around 16 months, and getting in vitro fertilization to work in rhinos is super tricky, but the team's already made some healthy embryos and now they're focused on getting one of them to actually develop into a living calf. If this works, the northern white rhino would go from being basically extinct to having a real chance at survival again. It's a long road, but it's probably the species' only chance. Next up, we have Dolly the sheep. Now, obviously sheep aren't extinct, but this was the first mammal cloned from an actual adult cell. This changed everything. Back in 1996, scientists took a cell from a Finn Dorset sheep and transferred its nucleus into an egg cell that had its own DNA removed. This egg was then implanted into a surrogate sheep, and out came Dolly, the world's first cloned mammal. She wasn't the first animal cloned overall, but cloning from an adult cell showed that mature cells could be sorta reprogrammed to develop into an entire animal. Dolly lived for 6 years, had 6 lambs. Cloning was now more than just science fiction. By the late 80s, black-footed ferrets were basically extinct in the wild. Luckily, a small group was found in Wyoming in 1981, and conservationists captured some to start breeding them in captivity. But since the population was so small, the ferrets' genes were too similar. Too much mixing of similar genes is obviously not a good thing. There needs to be some variation in there. So in 2020, the group Revive and Restore cloned a ferret named Elizabeth Ann to help fix this, using frozen cells from a wild ferret. Elizabeth Ann was born healthy and released back into the wild to add some new genetic variety into the ferret population. The Przewalski's horse is the last truly wild horse species on Earth. Wild meaning it was never domesticated. These horses used to roam the steppes of Central Asia, but by the late 60s, they were pretty much mostly wiped out. The main reasons were overhunting, plus fences and farms pushing them out of their habitats. After that, the only Przewalski's horses left were stuck in zoos and breeding programs. But in 2020, scientists used frozen tissue from a stallion named Kaporovic, stored for 40 years in a frozen zoo, to clone a healthy baby named Kurt in Texas. A few years later, they cloned Kurt's genetic twin, Molly. These clones brought fresh genes into the very small population, and now these horses are being released back into the wild. This is probably the most successful de-extinction case in history, hopefully not the last. Imagine reeling in a fish that was supposed to have been dead for 66 million years. Well, that's what happened in 1938 when a South African fisherman unknowingly pulled in a coelacanth, a prehistoric fish that scientists thought had gone extinct right alongside the dinosaurs. How insane would that have been? This living fossil has changed almost nothing in hundreds of millions of years. Unlike typical fish, the coelacanth has lobed fins with bone structures that almost look like primitive legs, and some researchers think they sorta kinda are, in that they may be this evolutionary bridge between sea creatures and the first land-walking vertebrates. Even weirder, they don't swim like normal fish. Instead, they sorta walk through the water, moving each fin in a coordinated way that kind of mimics four-legged animals. And oh yeah, they also glow. Their scales contain a type of bioluminescence that gives them an eerie, ghostly blue shimmer. Even now, coelacanths are incredibly elusive, found only in deep waters off of Africa and Indonesia. They also live pretty long, up to 100 years, maybe even more, and they give birth to live young after an absurdly long gestation period. Scientists estimate it takes up to 5 years for baby coelacanths to develop inside their mother, so they're really strange animals. If deep sea creatures had horror movie, the lancetfish would be at the top of the list. These nightmarish predators have long, ribbon-like bodies, oversized dorsal fins that run nearly their entire length, and razor-sharp needle-like teeth that jut out even when its mouth is closed. It's the kind of fish that looks like it shouldn't exist, and yet it does, lurking in the twilight zone of the ocean. One of the strangest things about the lancetfish is their diet, or lack of digestion to be more accurate. When scientists have studied their stomach contents, they've found whole, undigested prey inside, as if these fish have no real digestive system at all. It gives them an almost undead-like quality, as if they're constantly eating but never fully breaking down their food. Lancetfish are also hermaphrodites, meaning they have both male and female reproductive organs, which makes them even more unique. And here's another strange little fact. Even though the lancetfish live so deep down, they've been found washed up on beaches fully intact, leaving researchers wondering why they suddenly appear on land. Are they dying off because of some unknown environmental factor, or are they being forced to the surface by something even scarier lurking down in the deep. The discovery of the megamouth shark in 1976 was an accident, and one that left scientists amazed. This deep-sea giant, reaching up to 18 feet long, has one of the strangest appearances of any shark species. It's got this massive, gaping mouth that looks like it belongs to some extinct sea monster. Unlike most sharks, the megamouth doesn't hunt with speed or brute force. Instead, it swims slowly with its enormous mouth wide open, filtering tiny plankton and jellyfish from the water. It's a bizarre feeding method for a shark, more like a whale than a predator. What also makes the megamouth so terrifying is that we simply don't know a whole lot about it. This species was completely unknown to science until 1976, when one accidentally got caught in a US Navy ship's anchor line, and since then only a few dozen have ever been seen. That means a giant deep-sea shark was swimming around the world's oceans completely undetected for who knows how long, proving just how little we really know about what lurks deep down in the ocean. The chambered nautilus is basically a time capsule from 500 million years ago. Unlike most modern sea creatures, this relic has remained virtually unchanged since even before the age of the dinosaurs. It survived multiple mass extinctions and ice ages, making it one of the toughest survivors in the history of the planet. But what makes the nautilus kinda eerie is its design. Its shell follows the Fibonacci sequence, and for those who are unfamiliar, the Fibonacci sequence is a mathematical pattern found in galaxies, hurricanes, and even in human DNA. Is this just an evolutionary coincidence, or is there something more mysterious going on? Some believe that this natural spiral represents a form of perfection, almost as if it were intentionally crafted by some unknown force. Now, unlike squids and octopuses, its distant relatives, the nautilus lacks complex intelligence, but it makes up for it with one of the most efficient buoyancy control systems in the animal kingdom. It fills and empties its shell with gas to move up and down, allowing it to hover in this eerie, slow motion stillness. And how does it spot danger while living so deep down? Well, it has these large alien-like eyes that it uses to detect even the faintest movements in near total darkness. The goblin shark, this gorgeous deep-sea cutie, has a grotesquely elongated snout, rubbery pinkish gray skin, and its most breathtaking feature, that inviting mouth. Just look at those jagged, needle-sharp gnashers and tell me that you wouldn't want to kiss. Those jaws launch forward, by the way, like a projectile to grab their prey. First discovered in the late 19th century, the goblin shark remained a mystery for decades, rarely surfacing from its deep-sea habitat. Then, as commercial deep-sea fishing started to expand, more of them started appearing and showing just how bizarre this creature really is. Its hunting method is really cool, aside from the alien xenomorph jaw snap thing. See, instead of chasing its prey, the goblin shark senses electrical signals in the water using specialized organs in its snout, which is nuts. And then when an unsuspecting fish or squid swims by, its entire jaw explodes forward, grabbing its prey before snapping back into place. It's basically a biological harpoon, and it works so fast that high-speed cameras are needed to capture the movement. The goblin shark is a living relic, a species so ancient that it dates back over 125 million years, and I bet a lot of the animals that have to deal with it wish that it would have just stayed there. Alright, let's talk about sturgeon. You might be thinking, a sturgeon, really? That's just, a big fish. But the thing is, these fish are pretty much prehistoric monsters. Some species, like the beluga sturgeon, can grow over 20 feet long and weigh more than 3,000 pounds. That's too much, too many pounds. That's the size of a small boat, and their armored, bony bodies make them look like something that should have died out with the dinosaurs, but no, they're still swimming around in the depths of rivers and oceans, an animal that's barely changed in over 200 million years. People have mistaken them for sea serpents for centuries, and honestly, it's not hard to see why. There have been reports of massive, shadowy creatures surfacing in lakes and rivers, only for it to turn out to be an absolutely enormous sturgeon. And because some species live for over 100 years, you might just run into the same one your great-grandparents saw, which is pretty cool. Now we're gonna get a little outlandish, but hear me out. The plesiosaur. It's supposed to be extinct. That's what scientists say, but for over a century people have been spotting long-necked, flippered creatures in waters all around the world. Loch Ness, Lake Champlain, the oceans off Japan. Even experienced sailors and fishermen have reported seeing something that looks an awful lot like a living plesiosaur. One of the most famous cases may be the 1977 Zuyo Maru incident, where Japanese fishermen off the coast of New Zealand hauled up this bizarre rotting carcass that looked a lot like, well, a dead plesiosaur. Scientists quickly dismissed it as a decomposed basking shark, but some researchers just weren't buying this. The shape, the flippers, the long neck, it was all just a little too uncanny. If someone told you a sea serpent was caught on camera, your first thought would probably be like, meh, maybe, I guess. But then you see the frilled shark and suddenly you're not so sure anymore. Like, I guess, yeah, sea serpents do exist. The thing is pure nightmare fuel. It's got an eel-like body, rows of needle-sharp teeth, and a mouth that looks way too big for its head. It's been around for 80 million years and has barely changed at all, which tends to be the case for some of Earth's ugliest, creepiest animals for whatever reason. The frilled shark usually stays deep underwater, but every now and then one turns up near the surface. One was caught off the coast of Japan in 2007, and let's just say it didn't do anything to calm people's fears about what might be lurking in the abyss. Scientists say it's harmless to humans, but honestly, if you saw one of these things swimming toward you, would you really care? You'd have a mini heart attack regardless. Now, horseshoe crabs don't look that scary at first. They're just weird, alien-looking creatures that have been roaming the Earth for around 450 million years. But when you realize they've survived multiple mass extinctions, including the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, you start to wonder what kind of deal they made with the universe. Have horseshoe crabs been the key to life all along? Well, here's something really cool. Their BLOOD is blue, and I mean bright blue. And it has its uses, other than keeping the crabs alive, obviously. It's used in the biomedical industry. They harvest it to test for bacterial contamination in vaccines. So yeah, not only did these things outlive the dinosaurs, they're also aiding in modern medicine. Scientists still don't fully understand how they've managed to stick around for so long. Whatever they're doing though, it's working, because they barely changed in 500 million years. And finally, if there ever was a real-life sea monster, it's the giant squid. For centuries, sailors have spun tales about this massive tentacled beast dragging ships under the waves, but no one really believed them. Then in the early 2000s, scientists finally got proof. Giant squids were real, and they were just as terrifying as the legends made them out to be. These deep-sea giants can grow over 40 feet long, and their eyes, some of the biggest in the animal kingdom, are specifically adapted to see in the pitch-black depths of the ocean. They use their long, lightning-fast tentacles to snatch up their prey, and their beaks are so strong they tear apart just about anything they catch. And let's not forget about their arch nemesis, the sperm whale. Deep-sea battles between these two have been going on for who knows how long, and sometimes washed up whale carcasses show up covered in these massive sucker marks, proof that these fights aren't just tales told by sailors. Even now, we barely know anything about giant squids. They just live so deep that almost everything we've learned has come from dead specimens or very rare footage. There could be Godzilla-sized ones deep down in the ocean. Who knows?
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have the coelacanth. Imagine discovering a creature believed to have vanished with the dinosaurs, only to find it alive and swimming beneath the waves. That's the incredible tale of the coelacanth, a prehistoric fish thought to be extinct for over 80 million years until one was caught off the South African coast in 1938. With its lib-like fins that move like our own arms and legs, and an extra lobe on its tail, the coelacanth is a living fossil that offers a window into our planet's distant past. Subsequent captures and photographs, including a new species found near Indonesia's Sulawesi Island, revealed that these mysterious fish were not only alive, but thriving in deep underwater caves. Their unexpected reappearance challenges what we know about extinction and reminds us that the ocean still holds many secrets waiting to be discovered. In our number 9 spot today, we have the Lord Howe Island stick insect. Picture stumbling upon a creature so rare it was thought extinct, surviving on a single shrub atop a remote sea stack. The Lord Howe Island stick insect, affectionately dubbed the land lobster due to its hefty size, stretching up to 12 centimeters long, was once so plentiful on Lord Howe Island that fishermen used them as bait. After invasive rats decimated their population by 1920, they were declared extinct in the 1960s. But in 2001, a daring expedition to the jagged peaks of Ball's Pyramid, a sheer volcanic spike rising from the ocean 20 kilometers away, led to an astonishing discovery. There, clinging to life under a melaleuca bush, a tiny colony of these giant insects was found and captured on camera. This incredible comeback story has ignited efforts to breed them in captivity, with hopes of reintroducing them to their original homeland. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Fernandina giant tortoise. Imagine discovering a creature thought to have vanished over a century ago, alive and plodding along in the wild. That is exactly what happened with the Fernandina Island Galapagos tortoise. First found in 1906 and then presumed extinct after that lone specimen, hope was reignited when explorers captured on camera an elderly female tortoise on remote Fernandina Island in February 2019. This remarkable find was confirmed in 2021 when genetic tests proved she belongs to the long-lost subspecies. Now, conservationists are on an exhilarating mission to find her a mate and revive the population of these magnificent giants. In our number 7 spot today, we have Wallace's giant bee. For this one, we have to picture encountering a bee so colossal it's the size of your thumb. That's Wallace's giant bee, the world's largest known bee species, once believed to be extinct. First discovered in 1858 by explorer Alfred Russel Wallace in the Indonesian wilds, this magnificent insect seemed to vanish without a trace. For decades, it was considered lost to history until 1981 when it buzzed back into the spotlight, only to disappear again. Then, in a thrilling twist, a live female was captured on camera in 2019, her enormous jaws and impressive wingspan proving she was no myth. Nesting inside termite mounds on remote Indonesian islands, this king of bees reminds us that nature's most extraordinary secrets are still out there waiting to be rediscovered. In our number 6 spot today, we have the Somali elephant shrew. What if I told you there is a tiny creature that looks like a mix between a mouse, a gazelle, and an elephant, thought to be lost to science for over 50 years? That is the Somali sengai, or elephant shrew, a pint-sized mammal with a trunk-like nose and long, spindly legs that let it dart across rocky terrains at lightning speed. Scientists believed it had vanished since 1968, but in a thrilling turn of events, an expedition in Djibouti in 2019 captured this elusive animal on camera for the very first time. To their astonishment, they found that the Somali sengai wasn't just surviving, it was thriving with no immediate threats. This incredible rediscovery has reignited curiosity and wonder, reminding us that the natural world still holds many hidden treasures waiting to be found. In our number 5 spot today, we have the crest-tailed mulgara. You're trekking through the Australian desert and suddenly spotting a tiny furry face peeking out from the sands, a creature believed to have vanished nearly a century ago. That's exactly what happened when scientists rediscovered the crest-tailed mulgara in New South Wales Sturt National Park. This carnivorous but undeniably cute marsupial, weighing about 150 grams with pale blonde fur and a distinctive black crest along its thick tail, was thought extinct in the region due to predators like cats and foxes. Captured on camera during a routine survey for the Wild Deserts Project, this little survivor is sparking big excitement. Conservationists are now gearing up to remove invasive species and restore the mulgara's habitat, offering hope that these elusive animals will make a triumphant comeback. It's an amazing discovery that makes me question what secrets are still hiding in the outback. In our number 4 spot today, we have the New Guinea singing dog. Imagine trekking through the mist-shrouded mountains of New Guinea, where the dense jungle hides secrets older than time itself. As dusk settles, a hauntingly beautiful melody floats through the air, a series of harmonic howls unlike anything you've ever heard. Your heart races. Could this be the legendary creature locals speak of in hushed tones? Indeed. It's the New Guinea singing dog, a wild canine once thought to have vanished forever. Known for their extraordinary vocalizations that resemble a chorus of yodels and eerie whale songs, these elusive dogs were believed extinct in the wild for decades. Scientists had only studied them in captivity, where their numbers dwindled and their origins remained a mystery. But hope was rekindled when, in 2016 and again in 2020, explorers and researchers captured stunning images and footage of these animals roaming freely in the remote highlands. With their fox-like appearance, amber eyes, and a bushy tail, the New Guinea singing dogs are not just any wild dogs. They're living fossils, offering a glimpse into the early chapters of canine evolution. Their reappearance has ignited excitement among scientists and conservationists, sparking new studies to understand their genetics, behavior, and how they've survived undetected for so long. In our number 3 spot today, we have the terror skink. Imagine coming face to face with a lizard so fierce it's called the terror skink, boasting fang-like teeth and a menacing glare. First documented in the 1870s on the remote islands of New Caledonia, this 20-inch long reptile was thought to have vanished forever due to habitat loss and invasive rodents. For over a century, the giant terror skink was presumed extinct, until daring expeditions in the 2000s captured it on camera, alive and well on secluded islets. This thrilling rediscovery not only brings this formidable creature back into the spotlight, but also ignites hope that other lost species are out there, hidden in the world's unexplored corners, just waiting to be found. In our number 2 spot today, we have black-naped pheasant pigeons. Somewhere in the dense, rugged jungles of Papua New Guinea, scientists were searching for a bird so elusive it hadn't been seen by scientists since 1882. Just as hope began to fade, a camera trap reveals the impossible: a living black-naped pheasant pigeon. This magnificent, ground-dwelling bird, once thought extinct, was captured on camera by intrepid researchers on Ferguson Island after a grueling month-long expedition filled with steep climbs, roaring rivers, and relentless insects. Thanks to invaluable guidance from local hunters who knew the bird as awo, the team rediscovered this mythical creature in the nick of time. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the La Palma giant lizard. Picture you're standing atop the sun-soaked cliffs of La Palma, one of the Canary Islands' most enchanting gems, when suddenly, out of the corner of your eye, you spot a colossal lizard basking on a rocky outcrop, a creature thought to have vanished centuries ago. This is the La Palma giant lizard, a species once known only from ancient fossils and believed to be extinct. These magnificent reptiles, some reaching astonishing sizes, have been secretly thriving in the island's remote northern cliffs, evading human detection for generations. For over 20 million years, these lizards evolved in splendid isolation on the Canary Islands, growing to giant proportions thanks to the lack of natural predators. Their reign was unchallenged until humans arrived, bringing with them cats, converting wild landscapes into farmland, and hunting these giants, leading to their dramatic decline. But now, like something out of a legend, recent sightings and photographs have unveiled these elusive creatures, capturing them on camera as they lounge under the sun. Scientists are buzzing with excitement, scrambling to confirm the lizard's survival and learn more about their secretive lifestyles. Expeditions are being planned, and conservationists are hopeful that with protection, these ancient reptiles can reclaim their rightful place place in the island's ecosystem. The thrilling rediscovery of the La Palma giant lizard is not just a scientific triumph, it is a captivating reminder that our world still harbors hidden wonders. It sparks the imagination and beckons adventurers and nature lovers to ponder what other mysteries await us in the unexplored corners of the earth.
For the longest time, the giant squid was like a sea monster from folklore. Sailors would tell stories of encounters with them, but no one had ever captured photographic or video evidence. Marine biologist Richard Ellis even called it the, quote, most elusive image in natural history. And he wasn't wrong. In the 90s, there was a photo going around that claimed to show a diver next to a giant squid, but it turned out to be a different species. A big squid, sure, but not the squid. It wasn't until 2001 that we even got video of a baby giant squid. And then in 2002, someone in Japan found a full-grown one washed up on a beach, still alive, but barely. They tied it up by the docks and it died overnight. At least they got a picture. The real breakthrough came through in 2004. Two Japanese scientists dropped a camera 3,000 feet into the ocean with some bait. After 20 tries in one day, bam, a massive squid latched on. It thrashed so hard it left a tentacle behind. They ended up with over 500 photos and finally proved the thing was not just real, but actively hunting. Then in 2012, we finally got the money shot. Clear video of a giant squid. It was missing its feeding tentacles, probably from a fight with a sperm whale. It came in slowly, drawn by fake jellyfish lights and some bait, and it let them film for about 23 minutes. This fish was considered extinct. It vanished from records since the early 20th century. The Chell snakehead fish. Scientists hadn't seen it since specimens collected between 1918 and 1933 along India's Chell River. Then in 2024, a team led by Dr. Praveen Raj Jayasaman finally caught and photographed 3 live specimens, confirming the Chell snakehead was still alive over 85 years after it went missing. It was so rare it became known as the world's most elusive snakehead. And the wildest part, locals in West Bengal had been catching and eating these fish the whole time without realizing they were eating something scientists thought was long extinct. As you can see, this tiny snake is shockingly small, just about 10 centimeters long, small enough to fit on a coin. It's called the Barbados thread snake, and after nearly 2 decades without a confirmed sighting, scientists were worried it had disappeared for good. But in March of 2025, land researcher Connor Blades and Justin Springer from Rewild decided to overturn hundreds of rocks in a little forest near a jack-in-the-box tree in Barbados. Blades said, after a year of searching, you begin to get a little pessimistic. But they pressed on, and finally they did find one. The snake was transported live to the lab, filmed wriggling in a petri dish under a microscope, and finally identified. As Justin Springer put it, rediscovering one of our endemics reminds us that we still have something important left that plays an important role in our ecosystem. So, just goes to show you that tiny species can go missing for years, even on an island that's been mapped and visited by humans for hundreds of years. Next up, we have the Blyde River flat gecko. For over 34 years, this little finger-sized gecko was only known from 2 specimens collected back in 1991, and many doubted it was even a real species. Then in May of 2025, researchers Darren Peterson and John Davies from the Endangered Wildlife Trust were helicoptered into the remote canyon in South Africa's Blyde River region, the same area where the original specimens were found. Well, in just a few days, they found about 20 to 30 of them, photographed 7 and collected tissue samples to prove it is a valid species. Darren Peterson said, in terms of how we felt after hours of searching for the gecko and not finding it, we started to doubt whether the gecko still existed. When we found the first individual well after midnight, we were ecstatic. He added that this rediscovery will allow the species to be officially reassessed and protected. Next on the list is the black-napped pheasant pigeon. This chicken-sized pigeon was last seen by scientists in 1882, and for more than 140 years, the only physical evidence of it was in dusty museum drawers, until September of 2022, when a conservation team used camera traps on Ferguson Island in Papua New Guinea to capture photos and video. Jordan Boersma, one of the lead researchers, said they had, quote, less than a 1% chance of catching it on camera. And then he described scrolling through the shots as the most surreal moment of his life. Co-leader John Mittermeier added, seeing those photos of the pheasant's pigeon felt like finding a unicorn. They spent a month trekking through rough terrain and setting up 20 camera traps. It was actually local hunters who pointed them in the right direction. Without their help, this bird probably would have stayed, quote-unquote, extinct. Now that it's been found again, the big focus is making sure its home doesn't get wiped out by logging. Just back in May, a diver off Indonesia snapped the first ever photos of a live Indonesian coelacanth in its natural habitat. This is a huge deal, because while coelacanths were once thought to have gone extinct 70 million years ago, only 2 species are known to still exist today. There was one caught on camera back in 2013. That was a West Indian Ocean coelacanth found near South Africa. This new sighting is a totally different species, first time it's ever been photographed alive in Indonesia. The fish was spotted in the Maluku archipelago, about 475 feet deep. Marine biologist Alexis Chapuis from Unseen Expeditions was the one who saw it. And diving that deep is not easy. He had to use mixed gas diving, which comes with serious risks like decompression sickness if you mess up the timing. You can also die if you mess up the timing. Blank Pain, the watch company that helped fund the dive, called coelacanths often mistakenly called a living fossil or dinosaur fish, and pointed out they've been around for over 400 million years, long before dinosaurs. The Kashmir musk deer is one of those animals people thought was long gone. No confirmed sightings since 1948. Most experts assumed it had gone extinct. But then in 2009, a research team working in the forests of northeast Afghanistan, they spotted one. There were multiple sightings, including images of live ones on camera traps. Suddenly, an animal believed to be wiped off the map was back. These deer are super elusive. They're small, shaggy, they don't have antlers. Instead, the males have these long, fang-like teeth that look like vampire tusks. It's pretty wild. They also produce musk, which is highly valuable and unfortunately has made them a target for poaching for hundreds of years. That's part of why people thought they were gone. As one of the team members told reporters at the time, this is the first time we've been able to confirm the species is still out there since the 1940s. Now the challenge is making sure that they stay out there. The pygmy tarsier is this tiny, big-eyed primate that looks like a cross between a Furby and a gremlin. It's nocturnal, lives in trees, and hadn't been seen alive since the 1920s. So for decades, people figured it had gone extinct. But then in 2008, a team hiking in Indonesia's Lor Lindu National Park suddenly came across one. Not only did they see it, they actually managed to trap it. The team includes Dr. Sharon Gursky-Doyen from Texas A&M University, who said it was like finding a living fossil. They were hiking up steep mountains, setting traps high in the forest canopy, and boom, there it was. Tarsiers are incredibly hard to spot. They're tiny, quiet, they live way up in the trees, only moving around at night. But what makes the pygmy tarsier different is its size. It's even smaller than the others and only found in a very specific misty patch of forest in Sulawesi. The Cuban solenodon is an animal that seemed to vanish off the face of the earth until someone randomly spotted it and proved everyone wrong. This weird little creature is native to Cuba and looks kind of like a rat with a long, twitchy snout. And would you ever guess that it has venomous saliva? Because it does. It's one of the only mammals on Earth that can inject venom. People thought it had gone extinct way back in the 1970s. Nobody had seen one since 1890, and for a while was basically written off. That changed in 1974 though, when not one but 3 solenodons were caught alive. But even after that, sightings stayed extremely rare. It wasn't until 2003 that another one popped up, and this one got a name, Alejandrito. Scientists studied him for a couple days, found he was perfectly healthy, and then released him back into the wild. The problem is that the Cuban solenodon is ridiculously hard to find. It burrows underground, only comes out at night, and lives in dense mountain forests. And because it only has 1 litter per year, it doesn't bounce back easily. The terror skink sounds like something out of a 50s monster movie, but it actually sorta lives up to the name. The lizard was first described way back in 1876, and then it just disappeared. For over 130 years, scientists assumed it had gone extinct. No one had seen one alive. but that changed in 2003 when researchers in New Caledonia came across a live one. The terror skink is nearly 2 feet long, has curved fang-like teeth that are actually strong enough to tear through crab shells. It's an apex predator that hunts birds, crabs, also other reptiles. When it was finally photographed alive, scientists were stunned, not just that it was alive, but that it had gone unnoticed for such a long time despite being such a fierce hunter. Since then, it's only been seen a handful of other times. This first creature on the list is the Protolophila. Not exactly a household name, but that's probably because this thing was believed to have gone extinct not 100 years ago, not a couple thousand even. Scientists thought it went extinct about 4 million years ago. This tiny sea creature related to corals and sea anemones usually only shows up as little holes on the tubes of marine worms. Until recently, it was only known from fossils found in Europe and the Middle East, but when scientists in New Zealand dug up fossils of this thing that were supposedly from a time after the species had already disappeared, it got them curious enough to go back and check some tube worm samples they'd collected back in 2008, and it turns out Protolophila had been alive and well in New Zealand waters the whole time. They just hadn't noticed. As National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research scientist Dennis Gordon put it, it's one of those rare cases where studying fossils actually led to finding a species still alive today. Amura's whale is a ghost of the ocean, so rare that until 2015 scientists had never seen one alive. They were first confirmed as a separate species in 2003, based on DNA and physical differences from Blyde's whales. But even then, they were known only from dead specimens. That all changed in October of 2015 though, when an international team of biologists filmed Amura's whales off the coast of Madagascar. They spotted 44 individuals and collected some samples, making it the first time this whale had ever been documented alive in the wild. Amura's whales are pretty small by whale standards, only about 32 to 39 feet long or 10 to 12 meters, and people often mistake them for Blyde's whales. One of the coolest things about them is their asymmetrical lower jaw. White on the right side, dark on the left. Their fins are unique as well, which make them easier to tell apart if you're lucky enough to see one. Since that first footage, Amura's whales have popped up a handful of times, but sightings are still rare, and scientists still have a lot to learn about them. For almost 50 years, nobody had seen the Pastrum cyathiform, a rare stalked jellyfish that was last spotted in France back in 1976. Most experts figured it had gone extinct. But then Neil Roberts, just a tourist on an island off the coast of Scotland, flipped over a rock and found 4 of them. Roberts took some photos, but when he looked online, he noticed what he'd just photographed didn't really match any other photos. The only thing that looked close were old drawings. Turns out Neil had just taken the first ever photo of the species. Guy Freeman, editor of British Wildlife magazine, was amazed. When Neil first shared the photos, it was like seeing a ghost, Freeman said. Continuing, this thing had only ever existed in old drawings. It was suddenly there in the flesh. This image was shared to X by the National Parks Board, who wrote, "The Neptune's cup sponge is the first animal described from Singapore. It was collected in Rafflesia's presence in 1819 and described by Thomas Hardwick, presumed to be extinct until its reappearance in the region. It was rediscovered here in 2011. So a bit more on this. Neptune's cup is a sea creature people thought was gone for good. By 1912 it was considered extinct because it had been overharvested. Then in 2011, divers off Thailand and Singapore found a handful of these things alive. Singapore moved some to a marine sanctuary to protect them, but the same sanctuary is full of fish like map puffers and copperband butterfly fish that love snacking on them. Not exactly ideal, but since 2017, more have been spotted off Cambodia. Unlike most sponges that attach to reefs, these guys just anchor themselves in the sand at the bottom of the ocean. Turns out they weren't extinct, they were just really good at hiding. 2 fishermen off Gran Canaria got the surprise of their lives when they came face to face with one of the ocean's weirdest predators, a goblin shark. Now the thing is, these sharks are found way deep below the surface, but this one turned up while Marcos Hernandez and Ramon Santana were fishing. When it came up, we had no idea what it was, Marcos said. At first we thought it was a swordfish because of the snout, but then we realized it wasn't. It had leathery skin, and after looking online, we understood what it really was." End quote. The shark even showed off its signature party trick, where its jaw juts out. After confirming it was a goblin shark, they released it back into the water. This is the first confirmed sighting of the species in these waters. Goblin sharks are often called living fossils because they've barely changed in over 100 million years. They're rarely seen alive, let alone at these depths. Big fin squid are insanely rare. So rare that most deep sea explorers will just go their whole careers without seeing one. Big fin squid were first caught on camera in September of 1988 off northern Brazil, nearly 4,735 meters down, which is over 15,000 feet. They've got these crazy long skinny arms and big fins that give them this totally alien look. They really do look like something from another planet, and yes, those are arms, not tentacles. Big fins have 4 normal arms and 2 specialized feeding tentacles, but arms stretch so ridiculously long, sometimes as long as their whole body, it's easy to mistake them for tentacles. In 1992, a submersible spotted 2 off the coast of West Africa, and in 2000, an ROV in the Gulf of Mexico filmed one estimated at 7 meters long. More recently, an NOAA submersible captured a big fin in November of 2021 off Florida at nearly 2,400 meters deep. Some of them probably live over 6,000 meters down, which is basically the bottom of the sea. Scientists still don't fully understand how they live down there, but each rare sighting gives them an incredible peek at one of the strangest, most mysterious creatures in the ocean. The smooth-toothed black-tipped shark was thought to be extinct over 100 years ago, until it was rediscovered in 2008 at a fish market in Kuwait. The first specimen was caught back in 1902 by a naturalist Wilhelm Hein in Yemen and sent to the Vienna Museum along with other animals and plants, and for decades this thing went mostly unnoticed. Then in 1985, scientist Jack Garrick examined that old specimen and he identified it as a new species. Since no other specimens had been seen, scientists assumed it might be extinct, and some even questioned whether it was a valid species at all. But then in 2008, during a research expedition, the smooth-toothed blacktip appeared at Kuwait's sharkfish market. These sharks are relatively small, growing up to 4 feet long with a greenish-colored body. They seem to prefer shallow waters and feed mainly on small, bony fish. Not much else is known about them, but the smooth-toothed blacktip is currently listed as vulnerable on the International Union for Conservation of Nature's Red List of threatened species. The Shoshone pupfish is a tiny fish that lives in the middle of the desert, in small springs and drainage areas around Shoshone Springs, California. Scientists thought it had gone extinct by 1969, but in 1986, it was rediscovered hiding in a drainage ditch that had been covered in thick cattails. The population was so small at the time that almost all the fish were collected and sent to universities for breeding programs, just to make sure the species didn't disappear completely. These fish are built to survive extreme conditions. They can handle water temperatures from freezing all the way up to 44 degrees Celsius or 111 degrees Fahrenheit. They grow up fast as well, reaching sexual maturity in just 4 to 6 weeks. The coelacanth is a fish that scientists thought had been gone for 66 million years, basically since the time of the dinosaurs. But then in 1938, a fisherman off South Africa hauled one up and brought it to Marjorie Courtney Latimer, a museum curator. She didn't totally know what she had at first, but after calling in scientist J.L.B. Smith, it was confirmed that this fish, known only from fossils, was actually still a living species, a species that became known as the quintessential living fossil. Coelacanths live in the deep sea, usually between 150 and 700 meters down, or about 490 and 2,300 feet. They've got these weird lobed fins and a tail unlike anything you'd normally see on a fish, which is why scientists think they're kind of like this bridge, a missing link between fish and the first land animals. That's how long these things have been around. Since that first discovery, another species, known as the Indonesian coelacanth, was spotted off Indonesia in 1997. The vaquita is a tiny porpoise living in the northern part of Mexico's Gulf of California. It's basically the rarest marine mammal on Earth. As of 2025, there are fewer than 10 left. They're small, only about 5 feet long. They have dark rings around their eyes. They stick to shallow, murky waters, so that makes spotting them harder. The biggest danger for these things isn't natural predators, it's us. Fishermen set nets to catch another endangered fish called the totaba, and vaquitas get accidentally trapped in them. These other fish they're trying to catch are highly prized, especially its swim bladders, so these nets keep being used even though they're deadly for these porpoises. Conservation teams are patrolling their habitats quite often. They remove nets, they use underwater microphones to try and track them, but just aren't enough resources to fully protect them. So that's a fun note to end on.